hashtag if you're sending a message on Twitter.
Absolutely. You can also comment on our YouTube live stream. So if you go over to youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, you should find us up streaming there right now. And I want to say a big welcome to our analysts this morning. We've got Mr. Ireti, Bakare, Yusuf. Good morning, Mr. Ireti.
Morning.
There you go.
They did it to me on purpose.
Good morning. We also have Cheta Nwaeze in the studio. Good morning, Cheta.
Good morning.
And last but not least, we've got Ugo Dre of Nairametrics.
Morning, Lagos.
Good morning.
I do like the thing, just looking at him, that he would be conferring the highest national order, that's the Grand Commander of the Federal Republic, on the late Abiola, who died in government detention. And the statement does go on to say this really is the time when Nigerians in their millions expressed their democratic will in a way that was undisputedly the freest, fairest, and most peaceful election since our independence. Cheta, your thoughts on this story?
It's a very good move by the president, and I congratulate him for it. And I support honoring Abiola. However, it's a cynical move. It's a good move, but it's a cynical move. The best comparison I can think of is 2 weeks ago in the Champions League final, Sergio Ramos injured who's best player, Mohamed Salah, and took him out of the game.
Yes, he did.
So it's increased Real Madrid's chances of winning.
Yes, and it was
a
evil.
good move, but it was cynical.
Yes, it was.
Now, away from all of that, because the thing has generated a lot of reactions, there's a small question I want to ask. Has the president broken the law in conferring a national honor on someone who has been dead for 20 years? The 1963 National Honors Act specifically states that only soldiers killed in the line of duty can be awarded a posthumous national honor. This was confirmed yesterday by Justice Alpha Belgore, a former CJN. Why this was brought up is because 4 years ago, there was a move to give a national honor to Stella Adadevoh. Remember her?
Yes, of course.
And it was squashed because of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what is obviously a campaign ploy. Mm-hmm. Like what was a campaign ploy 4 years ago, being pushed through in opposition or in defiance of an existing statute. These are questions that need to
But
be
the question I would put to you, sorry, Folu, the question I would put to you in regards to this is, okay, so it's illegal. The memo has been sent out and everybody's gotten it. Can it still be implemented? Or do we need the opposition party to come and challenge it in court?
They're asking about the legality. It needs to be declared as an illegal act in a court.
Right, so they still need to come and challenge it, so it can't be implemented.
It doesn't need to be challenged. They can decide to challenge it.
Well, okay, that's what I'm saying. It needs to be challenged.
It doesn't need to be.
It doesn't have to be challenged.
It can be. There's a distinction.
No, there isn't. If it's illegal, it needs to be challenged.
No,
you can just
the
say
legality
that.
can only be declared in a court. So you can't say it is illegal. People are suggesting that is this illegal thing. So it's a question that would need to be answered legally in a court of law. So that's why I'm saying you can decide to challenge something.
Or you can let it go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. So even though it's against the Constitution.
Against the Act. The National Honors
This
Act.
is all very interesting, isn't it?
Well, let's move on. We don't have time to spend on that. So you can send us your messages, remember. We move on to the next story from ThisDay newspaper. The National Assembly are opposing the suspension of the anti-open grazing laws. So the National Assembly have expressed its opposition to a suggestion by Minister of Defense, Brigadier General Mansur Dan Ali, that states that had passed the anti-open grazing laws suspend legislation. Cheta.
On November 12th, 2017, I think that was 2 days after the Benue State government passed an anti-open grazing law. And we must be careful because a lot of people call it anti-grazing law. It's not an anti-grazing law. It's anti-open grazing. Mieti Allah called it an invitation to anarchy and made all sorts of threats. This was on November 12, 2017. Following that, the Inspector General of Police and the Minister of Defense have repeatedly called for states to suspend these laws. The problem is they haven't given an alternative except for open grazing to continue. That's one. Number two, which is quite important, in short, even more important, is that since these calls have gone up, 3 other states, Taraba, Ekiti, and now Abia, which was this week, I think on Monday or Tuesday, have passed their own anti-open grazing laws. These laws have been passed in response to the clamor from citizens of those states. I mean, in Umuahia, for example, I was actually in the middle of a protest once, As in, we went for something and there was a protest, and just if you know Umar here is a very small. That's once there's one small protest here, everything will just grind to a halt. So what we were doing just ground to a halt. There was a major protest because of accusations of headsmen constantly attacking people. So they were calling for an anti-open grazing law such as this, which the State House of Assembly has now passed. So the question is, should the Minister of Defense keep trying to impose on states to suspend this law? And it all comes down to something that is very major for a country that claims to be a federal republic, the rights of states. State is, yeah.
So just to ask very quickly, because you say imposition, why do you call it an imposition by the minister if he suggests that this is what
the language that he uses, he keeps suggesting that they must withdraw these laws. It's good that the National Assembly has now opposed him.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the National Assembly is doing it in their own interest, whatever. But you get the point. Point is, we need to sort these issues of the rights of states going forward, because all of these little things that are happening in different parts of the country are all rights of states issues.
All right, thank you very much for that, Cheta. We move on now. Let's talk about this next story from the Guardian newspaper. The VC decries poor funding of research by successive governments. Now, we're talking about the Vice Chancellor of Caleb University, Imota, Professor Ayindi Giaino, and has blamed successive governments for the slow pace of the nation's development, attributing this to inadequate funding of research. He says, "We said education is the bedrock of development, but if it is indeed the bedrock of development and the government is not funding it, it means we are not having a good foundation as a nation." The article does go on in some respects, but Mr. Ireti, I'm going to let you take us through this story.
Yes, I love this story, and I know many of our listeners are going to say, no, she's not going back there, but I've got to go back there, because that quote you just read out for me is part of what I was trying to say last week.
Absolutely.
When I said not too young, that thing, not too young to vote,
Yeah,
or
to run.
that's the one, not too young to run. The bedrock of our development is broken. So why then do we think that we've got the people, or we're creating the leaders of tomorrow, and we think we're going to be able to find? But he goes on to say, and basically some of the things he said, I mean, you really have to go and read this article. It's not long, very interesting, and I really have to applaud the man. So some of the things he goes on to say is, look, he said the former Treasurer Secretary of the United States and the former Secretary of State of the United States, Condoleezza Rice and Franz Geitzmer, respectively. Both of them, what did they do after they finished work? They went back to university. Why? Because you have to take business and practical experience back to university for the youth to be able, for the students and the leaders of tomorrow to be able to learn from it. He goes on to say, he said, look, he expressed the quality of the graduates being churned out in our institutions and stressed the need to address the decadence in the sector. Again, it goes back to the same thing. We are not churning out the right graduates. He then went on to say, the best. He said, the best, global best, we need to connect with global best human development training institutions in the area of global finance. Now, here's what I say to us Nigerians. When we were discussing this too young to run, not too young to run, whatever, last week, we keep saying we will always find somebody, we'll find the best. My question is, if we are churning out the best graduates, then surely we would then end up with the best from the best of the best, rather than the best from the worst. Right. You know, and so that's why we need, and he was decrying that government needs to start investing, and this is it. You can't then give us, and we also said this last week, I said, look, you're giving us a piece of bread, do you understand me? And you expect us to be rejoicing, and as usual, Nigerians, we start rejoicing. Oh, they've given the legislation that says we can do this, we can do this, we can do that. No, you are not giving me the ammunition to do it properly. And therein lies the point. We need to prepare our universities. The bedrock of our society is broken. So in 20 years' time, 15 years' time, 200 years' time, unless we fix that bedrock now, we are going to continue to regurgitate bad leader upon bad leaders upon bad leaders. And it's got nothing to do with age. It's
right.
just what we produce.
We have a message from Francis in Yaba. He says, I'm not a lawyer, but I see clarity. Since the court of competent jurisdiction annulled the June 12th election, shouldn't the first move have been to get a higher court to rescind the decision or judgment before the conferment of the honors? How do you have a presumed winner of an election that the court said did not hold? My thoughts on this is just a ploy to secure the Southwest bloc votes. Let's not forget that as much as we may love the late Abiola in declaring himself president, what he did was an act of treason against the state. So should we expect same reward
Very
for
true.
Nnamdi Kanu of IPOB anytime soon? That's Francis from Yaba.
He makes a very good point, and we don't want to discuss it.
MI from Akoka says, Bashiru Mushid Kashimo Olawale Abiola GCFR. I think it's an ingenious move by the presidency to confer the posthumous recognition. I will just respect it and let it be about NKO. We'll dissect the political undertones and connotations another day. Eku June 12th. Ozzy says, wow,
That must be
You
devout.
just want to
Wow,
sit down.
Mr. President just woke up. He finally realizes that he's going to run in 2019. It's too little too late. We the people are not dull. We see you, Mr. President. We the youth may be lazy according to you, but we have the numbers and a voice. We go through to Twitter very quickly. We have this one from Ayo. It says, whether Buhari's June 12th declaration is scenic or illegal, what matters is that a vital page of our history that was erased by an insensitive political cabal has just been rewritten boldly and indelibly. I must say PMB got this right.
All right, let's keep it moving. We do see your messages and we'll get back to them as soon as we can. Up next, this is in from the Punch newspaper. Let's talk about the Offa robberies. We haven't withdrawn our invitation to Saraki, say the police. So they say they've not withdrawn their invitation to the President of the Senate, Bukola Saraki, over his alleged link with suspected robbers who invaded banks in Offa on the 5th of April of this year. The force public relations officer, Jimo Moshood, stated this in Abuja while parading two more suspects of the robberies and said that Saraki must appear in person to defend himself. Cheta.
Well, 3 days ago, after the meeting between the Vice President Osibajo and both the IGP and the head of the DSS, which was reported by all the papers, they reported that Saraki need no longer appear before the police, but rather issue a written explanation.
Even Saraki tweeted about it. He's
The
supposed to
papers
tweet about
reported
it.
it, Saraki tweeted about it. The timeline given for the explanation was 48 hours. And 72 hours later, we are hearing that the police have no longer, that the police never asked that he should issue a written explanation, but that he must appear in person. Abi, that's what they are now saying. It reminds me that about 6 days ago, today is June 7th, Abi. So, no, about 8 days ago, Mike Adiko, the policeman who was involved in the Offa robbery, and one of the robbers confessed to raiding a police station for the arms that they used in the robbery. And then 72 hours after that, the police paraded another set of the robbers and said that it was Saraki that
They
supplied
also
the
mentioned the
arms.
policeman that was
So,
helping him, or is it policewoman? Somebody
Michael
that was helping
Adiko.
him. That's the one.
So I think that there's something with our police and 72 hours. Since they are flipping, that's just what else do you want me to say?
Well, I think they're being used.
All right, thank you very much,
Chess
guys.
games.
We move forward now with this next story from the Punch. Court convicts first bank chairman, MD of contempt. So the Federal High Court in Lagos on Wednesday convicted the First Bank of Nigeria Limited, its chairman, Mrs. Ibukun Awosika, and the managing director, Dr. Adeshola Adedunton, of contempt of court. The court dismissed their preliminary objection to a contempt charge filed against them by the Ejama Ebubu community in Eleme local government area of the state of River State. And they said they actually found them guilty of refusal of the bank to release 17 billion naira of interest that the bank allegedly guaranteed to pay for the community on behalf of SPDC. And they've given them from now, they suspended the sentence until September 6th, which time, if they fail to pay the said sum, they'll be forced to go to jail. Ugo Dre, what's your take?
Well, I don't think they'll go to jail. Okay, so this is actually two stories in one. So the first part is the conviction that the court just gave against the CEO of First Bank and of course the chairman of the bank, Ibukun Awosika. And the judge also gave them a bit of leeway. He says, look, I give you 3 months to make do of your payment. If you don't make do of that payment, then you probably be in jail. So, but what's the contention here? The bone of contention here is actually 17 billion. In fact, not just 17 billion. I think it's actually 122 billion, and I would explain. So, sometime I think in 1991 there was a case brought against Shell by some Ogoni chiefs, and that was over oil spill. Yeah, right. So that has been in court since then. I think sometime in 2010 or so, court awarded judgment in favor of the Ogoni community, and so that of course went into appeal. And I think ended up in the Supreme Court. And so along those lines, First Bank Shell was requested to get a guarantee from a bank to pay for the oil spill. And I think it was 17 billion at the time. So they got First Bank to put down that guarantee. So so the judgment now, so the Supreme Court awarded judgment to the community, and then what this means is they would have to pay not just the 17 billion, but plus accrued interest over time.
Yeah.
So everything culminates into I think 122 billion.
First Bank have to
So
pay
the
that.
CBN intervenes and says, "Lord, are you actually going to do this? This is going to affect not just the bank, but the entire banking system." So this is actually a very, 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 very important story.
case, yeah.
And it's something that we're really, really following, especially some of us who typically invest in the stock market, because we like to know how this is going to affect the banks. And I don't know, you'd expect Shell to actually put that money forward, because I'm sure First Bank put the guarantee, but I'm sure they must have sort of protected themselves or hedged against that at some point. But it will be interesting to see how.
That's what I was going to ask you. How does this affect me, the ordinary woman, man on the street, that's put her money in First Bank, that's putting her money in banks, that's got pension, etc., etc. How does it affect inflation? How does it affect us?
Well,
those of us who don't play shares.
The only thing, it affects the shareholders of the
Only.
bank. You know, if it's going to really affect anyone directly, it's the shareholders of the bank. Because what it means is that, if that money goes through, and assuming that there were no hedges, then that means the bank would have to pay that money out of its own capital. I think First Bank has that kind of money. Now in terms of depositors, it probably won't, it won't affect depositors' money. CBN will definitely step in if there's going to be anything. But for shareholders, it's probably a bit of a worrying development.
Thanks, Ugo Dre.
We've got a few messages to get through. Cheta sends in a message responding, saying, with due respect to Justice Buhari, he is wrong. Section 2.1 of the Honours Warrant, which is a subsidiary legislation made pursuant to the National Honours Act 1964, provides two conditions for eligibility. 1, that the person so honoured must be a citizen of Nigeria, and 2, that any person other than a citizen of Nigeria can be honoured if the president directs that he or she should be honoured through a prescribed method. In fact, Section 3 grants the power to dispense with the conditions for eligibility provided in Section 2. Now, there is nothing that says that whoever is honoured must be alive or dead. It says that you must be a citizen of Nigeria. Section 3 is what is called an interpretation law as a clawback section. So it claws back the entire Section 2 and grants the president power to prescribe new methods. Pay attention to the phrase expedience to dispense with the requirements of paragraph 2 of this article, says Chidozie.
Excellent. Thank you, Chidozie. We really appreciate that.
Should just stop. Like everything Buhari says,
Just weary.
Everything is
weary.
Consulting in courts.
Yeah, Cheta is not here.
All right, let's move forward to this next story from Guardian now. Ms. Ireti, I'll come to you with this story. Fresh hope for new minimum wage. Employers have expressed their readiness to pay the minimum wage whenever it comes into law, and this was agreed upon at the 107 International Labour Conference in Geneva, Switzerland. They spoke to reporters and they really expressed hope that the National Assembly actually approve this and sign it into law as soon as possible, because they say they have the interest of the workers at heart. What's your take?
Well, this is interesting. So it's the employers that are speaking. Nigeria, yes, I said employers. So they're speaking at a conference, a labor conference in Geneva. And this is the quote they said. The representative, he said, employers are believers in the rule of law, and they have been involved in setting threshold of minimum wage in Nigeria. The fact that we are on the table for negotiation is indicative of the fact that we're ready for the outcome. If at the sectoral level we have been faithful to the approach, then the country can count on us to be faithful to the outcome of the discussions on the new national minimum wage. Why am I so cynical about this? This is what happens. I said this to somebody. I was speaking to somebody who was from the international news, and they said, oh, they're going to be talking to one of our lawmakers, and they're going to try and get them to do this and get it to do. And I said, look, this is what happens in Nigeria. Our lawmakers, when they get on an international platform, they say the right things because they know that's what you guys want to, exactly. They know that's what you guys want to hear. I am not a cynical person. It's just how it's done. That's PR. That's public relation. You speak well, you exchange well, you deliver well, and everybody moves on. You go to the backyard and start doing something totally different. Why am I so cynical about this is I don't think there is an employee in Nigeria that feels that their right is being totally, how do you say, they feel that they've been totally respected by their employer. In fact, one of the some of the things that we get in Nigeria is that employers abuse, and I'm using the word abuse, they abuse their rights as employers over their employee on so many levels that the employees are powerless. And now you're saying to me that you're in support of the minimum wage. Guess what? The minute we start doing the minimum wage is put to law, I would like us to do a survey and see how many employers.
They'll be forced to implement it.
Well, who's forcing in Nigeria is the question. Who's forcing, who's monitoring, who's making sure it's done? So all we've got to do, you do a sample survey and see how many of them live up to what this guy has said. I bet you they don't.
We'll just watch and see.
Is it also worth just noting that I think in Nigeria as a culture, we need to develop the habit of actually speaking out and reporting to the correct authorities when things are wrong? I agree. Because I think a lot of the time employees feel that they have no choices and they haven't actually checked, they haven't explored. We simply just say, oh, you know how these people are. So just bear that in mind. If you do find that you are being exploited, speak out. Sometimes even just speaking to the person right at the top, not HR. Just going right to the top will solve your problem.
In this country where jobs are scarce, let's be careful. We all know what can happen. You get blacklisted,
but we just had this conversation yesterday talking in terms of broadcasters and the problems they go through receiving, pay for play, no pay for play, whether your institution also supports it or doesn't. But the truth is, you will never be given anything in life unless you fight for what it is that you want.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
All right, thank you very much, and hopefully that happens and we move forward. And now, moving forward, a New Telegraph has this story next. FEC OK's tax law reforms introduces penalties for gas flaring. So the Federal Executive Council has approved the review of the country's tax system, tax law system, to exempt the charges of value-added tax. Some of the areas that were exempted was the areas including the public transportation and public housing and life insurance. Ugo Dre, what's the impact on this?
Yeah, very important development. We've been waiting for tax reforms for eons in this country. It's gotta happen, and at least this is the first time that the Federal Executive Council has now at least made a statement, or to an extent a commitment that we should expect tax reforms. It's been in the burner for a while now. Now I don't know how long it's going to take for this to maybe come to fruition. But let me just give you a perspective. Do you know that currently, if you sell a property, right, maybe land or property, the Federal Inland Revenue Service can actually slam you a VAT.
Yeah, like
isn't that normal?
Isn't that normal? That's standard.
So it's abnormal here. That's because we have the capital gains tax, which is what deals with property sale. But Inland Revenue will tell you, well, as far as they're concerned, VAT, so long as property or land sale or assets is not included, is not in the list of excluded items, then please,
that's the excuse.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to go through that argument, and if you are some kind of person that, I think you guys were saying earlier on that if you don't take it to court, it just flies. But if you argue well and say no, in substance, then it might allow it. So there are a lot of loopholes like that with our tax laws.
It's a good job. It's a good point you make.
Careful about. So, and that's what this is about. So, and then of course there are some that are just, quite frankly, inimical to the progress of businesses in Nigeria, right? So there are just some items that people actually, some services or businesses that people actually do that. Man, come on, you don't need to start to pay VAT for all this one stuff, like transportation and all this kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things we need to deal with. And our corporate tax, it is actually very old. I think it's the British tax that we inherited in the 60s, 70s. So we need reforms there. So the same kind of tax system that applies to a multinational is the same type that applies to Ugo Dre Limited somewhere. So you've got to be able to make it simpler for small businesses to actually pay tax.
Very true.
And
Well, just pointing out, and I don't know, perhaps someone who maybe has looked through the new Companied and Allied Matters Act that our National Assembly put through, it might address some of those issues as well, perhaps, in terms of the separating and making things easier for small to medium enterprises versus large corporations. So
yeah, it might, but at the same time, they still need to at least reform some of our corporate tax laws. Very, very important, so that you and I can pay tax more often
and smile while doing it.
Yes, and the government can dash it out as they wish.
We've got messages coming through up on our live stream on YouTube. A big shout out to Tijani and to Chukuma Moma. So Chukuma Moma says, this is Nigeria where anything happens and nothing is done about it. Are the police telling us that they cannot go after Saraki the same way they went after Dino? Let them arrest him and question him now. While Tijani just wants to know about public holidays, says, so is it holiday this June 12th or next
June
year? 12th? It's a real question, so I mean, we'll wait and see.
No, they wrote it in there. It's next year. It's actually written in the press statement.
There you go. While Shegun up on WhatsApp says the children of the elite will be the greatest recipients of the not too young to run legislation. Power will be passed from parents to children. Samuel Faleki says, why can't the police speak with one voice? In any case, it's not the interest of the police to have a written statement from Senator Saraki. Remember what happened when a certain policeman tried to read? I'm not sure if transmission will feature in the letter. Wow, guys. While comments on the NLC, Yinka says, my advice to the NLC is that they better ensure that they increase or what they want now that the presidency is in a happy mood. Election is around the corner, so they will want to look and act good. However, I hope that they are sensible enough to understand that because their salary increases, it does not mean that their spending power will also increase. In summary, increase in salary is not the solution, but rather the economy running rightly. Hashtag June 12, hashtag holiday loading. Once again, Presido, I see you in 3D. I see you in 3D.
While we're seeing some improvements in the human trafficking situation, and a lot of groups and even the government is fighting against this, it's still happening. Now, the Nigerian Immigration Service in Katsina State has apprehended no fewer than 4 persons. They said they're said to be aged between 21 and 43 to suspected human traffickers, and they rescued in this process 38 victims of human trafficking in that state. Mr. Ireti Bakare, what's your take on this?
We'll
take 2 go. Okay.
Yeah. It's I mean, I was happy to read this. At least people have now been apprehended. I guess the expose that CNN had a few months ago, I think sometime last year, basically threw this into limelight and actually demonstrated how porous our borders are, or how porous our at least our ability to defend or to stop human trafficking has been over the years. So but we still need to deal with the root factors here. That there's usually an incentive to do something. So the incentive is both ways. So for the human traffickers, there's a lot of money being made by trafficking people. It's a long value chain. And then for the people that are actually being trafficked as well, it's because they're all looking for better life elsewhere. So I think a lot of limelight needs to be done. The media has a lot of role to play here, not just by just reporting this, but actually highlighting the dangers of human trafficking. We need to do a lot more of underground investigation. We can't always wait for the BBC or CNN to come on, start to put this thing limelight for us, but we have to do it locally, and that's actually how it gets. You start to deal with the root of the problem. So if the local media, one small radio station somewhere in Kaduna is actually putting it up and demonstrating how dangerous this is and how bad it is for them, and then we can start to at least see some progress around stopping human trafficking.
All right, thank you very much, Ugo. And very quickly, we touch on this story to round up in a few seconds, Mr. Ireti Bakare Yusuf. Please take a look at the story from the Guardian newspaper. It says stakeholders in the environment sector want Nigerians to move against plastic pollution. They're urging the people through a forum that they put together, the Resource Conservation Development Initiative. They're asking that people should ensure that plastics are only recycled. What's your take?
Very quickly, so drinks bottles, water sachets, packets, biscuit packets, refuse collection, better management, recycling. There's your solution. And fundamentally, we Nigerians are dirty people. Stop trashing the streets. Take your trash home. Put it in your car. Put it in your pocket. Throw it away when you get home. And if you see somebody throwing rubbish on the street, stop them, challenge them, tell them to pick it up. I do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
On that note, we are done with Freshly Pressed for this morning. Thank you, Mr. Ireti, Bakare, Yusuf. Find her on Twitter at COD Lagos. Find Ugo Dre as Ugo Dre at Ugo Dre of Nairametrics. No, that's not the end of his thing. But we are coming in at 8:15 with entertainment inside of the Grapevine. Frank Donga is in the building. Stay with us.
The headlines. The
I
story.
think the other day I said,